I'm Bram Warren, and the first time my mother tried to take my life away in 21 years was in a county courtroom, sitting 10 feet from me, asking a judge to sign my control over to her. She left when I was 7. No calls, no letters, no birthdays. Just disappeared like somebody shut a door and never turned back. I was 28 when she came back, and it was too perfect to be coincidence. My grandmother's death had just wrapped into final paperwork, house deed, bank access, the last of the legal keys. That morning, I was in my condo making coffee before work, the same routine I'd run for years. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, southern area code. I almost let it go. I picked up. A woman's voice came through, soft like she'd been rehearsing it in her car. "Hi, baby boy, it's Mom." My hand jerked. Coffee hit the counter, dark liquid spreading fast. I didn't feel sad. I felt alert, like when glass breaks somewhere you can't see. She didn't wait. She launched into it. She was settled now, lived just a couple hours away, and was married to a man named Quentin, a lawyer actually. She'd found peace, she said, and wanted to make things right. I didn't give her a thing. No warmth, no opening. I ended the call without saying goodbye, then stared at my phone like it had fingerprints. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. 5 minutes later, I got a credit alert. My heart sank before I even read it. New activity. Score dropped 112 points overnight. That's when my gut flipped over. That fire alarm feeling wasn't nostalgia. It was danger. I logged in. New cards opened. Cards. Old balances I didn't recognize. But that wasn't the worst part. Some of those accounts had been alive for years. Later, in court, Marla sat across from me with Quentin beside her, slick and smiling like a win was inevitable. They were asking the judge to make her my conservator, on paper, to take control of my accounts, my house, everything. What they didn't know was I'd spent weeks building a trail. Screenshots, mail copies, certified reports. I'd built it like scaffolding, solid, boring, undeniable. Quentin smiled, like this was already over. But he was facing the wrong direction, because I wasn't falling. I was loading ammo. I stayed at the kitchen table until well past midnight. Lit up by the glare of 3 screens and a spreadsheet, I kept updating every time I found a new lie in my name. One after another, the fraud showed itself, slow and smug, like it had been there the whole time just waiting for me to notice. The oldest account hit hardest. Opened when I was 15. 15. I still had a learner's permit and braces when someone out there started pretending to be me on paper. 9 credit cards, 2 personal loans, a retail line account I didn't even recognize. Total balance just under $95,000. The due date stretched across years, like this wasn't a one-time grab. It was a system. The fraud wasn't clumsy. Whoever did it made minimum payments for years, just enough to stay under the radar. Some of the cards were nearly maxed out now, but none were in collections. That told me something. Whoever opened them didn't just want the money, they wanted the identity alive. I thought about the cabinet, Dory's cabinet. That hallway was her archive, lined with drawers, folders, tabs by year and topic. She didn't do digital. She believed in paper, paper with ink, dates, proof. The woman treated a bank statement like evidence. The next morning, I called Tamsin. She worked forensic accounting in Springfield and had a brain like a scalpel. I told her what I'd found. She didn't say, "Oh wow." She didn't act shocked. She got clinical. She asked for dates, account names, creditor addresses. Then she said, flat, "This isn't a hack. Someone's had your information for a long time. Who had access to your documents when you were a kid?" I didn't need time to think. My eyes were already on the hallway in my mind. Dory's cabinet. Locked for strangers, unlocked for one person, Marla. Not just because she was blood, but because she used to live there. Marla knew where everything was, I said, my voice like sand. She knew the layout, the system, the drawer with the personal folder. Tamsin paused, then said, and she waited until Dory was gone. That night, I pulled out the manila envelope Dory had labeled legal, Bram. It had my birth certificate, my social security card, my first bank statements, copies of student loan papers, even the employment offer from my current job. Every piece of personal data needed to become me on paper had lived in that house for over 2 decades, untouched, protected, until now. I started making lists. Every account, every date opened, every balance. I scanned documents, labeled folders, and put them on a drive with password protection. Tamsin had taught me, documentation beats emotion. If I wanted to win, I couldn't lead with how it made me feel. I had to lead with what I could prove. And it hit me again. Marla didn't show up out of nowhere. She'd been tracking the situation. She waited until the estate settled, waited until no one stood between her and the paperwork. She didn't come back to make things right. She came back to finish what she'd already started. 3 days after that call, I was back at my desk trying to act normal when the receptionist buzzed my line and said, "Careful, like it was a live wire. There's a woman here who says she's your mother." I stood up too fast and nearly knocked my chair over. When I walked out front, Marla was already inside the lobby, arms crossed like she belonged there. Her makeup was light, clothes plain but expensive, and her eyes were red like she'd either been crying or timed it just right to look like it. The second she saw me, she threw her arms wide and said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear, "There's my baby boy." She pulled me into a hug I didn't return. I just stood there, arms stiff at my sides, until she let go and stepped back like she expected applause. She started talking fast about grace, forgiveness, what time restores, and how she'd come a long way. Then she name-dropped her husband, Quentin Marsh, Esquire. Maybe you've heard of him. He's done quite well. She smiled like I was supposed to care. Then came the next card. And I've got a daughter too, Bryn. She's 21, just graduated. I didn't say a word. Marla started asking questions like they were part of some warm conversation. "Are you still driving that little truck? Do you live nearby? Has the house been sold yet? Dory didn't leave a will, did she? Are you okay, sweetheart?" I know grief hits people in strange ways. I watched her eyes while she spoke. They didn't look like a mother's eyes. They looked like someone measuring the dimensions of a room before they decided where to start gutting it. I said, "Flat next time, call first." She blinked like I'd slapped her. I didn't say mom. That word was a closed account. She stepped back, gave me this disappointed head tilt like she was the one hurt, then murmured, "I just want to help." I turned and walked away without saying anything else. That weekend I drove out to Dory's house. Dory had insisted I keep a key, even after I moved out. She said families shouldn't have to knock on locked doors when life got heavy. I hadn't planned on staying long. I just needed to breathe in the quiet and think straight. But the second I opened the hallway cabinet, I froze. The files were off. Dory's folders were always aligned, labels straight, corners neat. Now, 2 were clearly shifted, like someone flipped through them in a hurry, but tried too hard to make it look untouched. The envelope with my Social Security card had been opened, not torn, slid. Clean. Someone who knew what they were doing and exactly where to look. I checked the side drawer where Dory kept personal letters, half expecting something to be missing. Instead, I found something extra. An envelope marked personal, buried under old medical receipts. Inside was a folded letter, Marla's handwriting, unmistakable. She had asked Dory for $7,800. It was dated more than 10 years ago. The words were desperate, messy. She said she was in danger and just needed a little help. Dory never mentioned it. She didn't send the money either. She kept the letter. And now, I knew why. Later that night, I called Kendra, my cousin on Dory's side, the one who didn't stir drama just to feel important. She confirmed it fast. Yeah, Marla started asking around maybe 2 months ago. Said she was wondering if you'd moved into the place yet, if it was still in the family. She made it sound casual, but I didn't buy it. I didn't scream. I didn't post. I did what Dory would have done. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The cabinet, the opened envelope, the folded letter. I emailed digital copies to myself and to Tamsin with the subject line, "Controlled access breach." I didn't need to explain. We both knew what it meant. 2 days after I sent the photos to Tamsin, a certified envelope showed up in my mailbox. Thick paper, county seal in the corner, my full legal name printed like it belonged in a file cabinet somewhere. Nobody sends good news that way. I carried it inside and opened it at the kitchen counter with a letter opener Dory used to keep in her desk. The first page made my jaw tighten before I even finished the first paragraph. It was a petition for conservatorship. Marla was asking the county court to declare me mentally unfit to manage my own finances, my truck title, and the deed to Dory's house. The wording tried to sound gentle, like this was some sad family intervention. According to the filing, I was suffering from psychological instability following bereavement. The next page made it worse. Attached was a psychiatric evaluation signed by a man named Dr. Lowell Price. The document said I showed signs of paranoia, impulsive behavior, and episodes of agitation and aggression. It recommended immediate conservatorship by my closest responsible relative. I stared at the signature for a long time. I had never met Dr. Lowell Price. No appointment, no evaluation, no conversation longer than 0 seconds. The attorney on the filing was Quentin Marsh. He had formatted everything perfectly: clean headings, polite legal language, citations stacked neatly like bricks. On paper, it looked like a caring husband helping his worried wife save her troubled son. I sat down and called the only lawyer I trusted. Harlan Bell had handled Dory's estate and had known her longer than I'd been alive. 63 years old, gravel voice, and the kind of patience that came from decades of watching people lie under oath. I read him the filing. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a short silence on the line. Then he sighed like he'd just confirmed something he already suspected. "This isn't about your well-being, Bram," he said. "This is a financial takeover dressed up as compassion." I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my forehead. "They're trying to take control of everything," I said. "The house, the accounts, all of it." "That's exactly what they're doing," Harlan replied. "And there's one more detail that you need to understand. If you ignore this filing or miss the hearing, they can win by default." That sentence landed like a brick. "So we fight," I said. "We do," Harlan answered. "But we do it quietly." He explained the strategy in the same calm tone Dory used when she balanced checkbooks. If Marla believed I was panicking, she would start cleaning house, closing accounts, deleting records, maybe even abandoning the fraud trail. But if she thought I was confused and slow to react, she'd keep operating normally. Normal behavior leaves evidence. That afternoon, I filed an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission, then a police report with the county sheriff's office. Case numbers appeared on the paperwork like anchors I could hold on to. I placed fraud alerts with the credit bureaus and froze everything that wouldn't shut down my normal banking. Every confirmation email went into a folder labeled Case. Tamsin started building a timeline. She worked like a surgeon, dissecting each account. Dates opened, credit limits, billing addresses, payment patterns. Late that night, she called me and said, "These minimum payments aren't random. Someone's maintaining these accounts on purpose." That word stuck with me. Maintaining. Like a garden someone watered just enough to keep alive. The next day, my supervisor, Wade Knoll, called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair and tried to sound casual. "Everything okay at home, Bram?" he asked. "I heard there might be some family issues going on." I kept my voice level. "There's a legal situation. My attorney advised me not to discuss details yet." Wade nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt already moving behind his eyes. "Well," he said carefully, "if you need a couple personal days to get your head straight, just let me know." I walked out of his office with a tight feeling in my chest. Marla hadn't even stepped into the courtroom yet, and her story was already traveling ahead of her. That night, Harlan called again. "I'm digging into this doctor," he said, "and will subpoena anything tied to your name: applications, signatures, records." Then he paused for a second before adding something that sounded almost satisfied. "Let them walk into court confident, Bram." Then we turned the lights on. The next strike didn't come through court or mail. It came wrapped in a DM from someone with dimples and soft lighting. Bryn Marsh messaged me through a social account, so polished it looked fake. The handle had a couple thousand followers, all good vibes and college campus smiles. Her bio said, "Pre-law, coffee addict, sunshine on purpose." Like she was allergic to stress. She started sweet, said she wanted to meet me, her half-brother, said she didn't know how to reach out sooner, but hoped we could talk as family, not court cases. I didn't buy it, but I agreed anyway. Sometimes the smartest move is letting the other person speak. We met at a coffee shop near the university. Bright, public, safe. Bryn wore a soft sweater, no makeup, and acted just nervous enough to pass for sincere. She talked fast about the weather, finals, how crazy it was to be caught in all this. Then she shifted. "So, how are you holding up with everything?" she asked, voice light like she was just curious. I shrugged. I'm managing. She leaned forward like she cared. Grief does weird things, right? Like, do you ever feel kind of on edge? Not really, I said, mostly focused. She nodded, like that answer didn't fit her checklist. A few minutes later, she asked if I'd ever talked to someone professionally. Then, it's a lot. Grief, responsibility, bills. Are you able to keep up with everything okay? I gave short answers, neutral, boring. I didn't bite. Because by that point, I wasn't talking to a person. I was answering a questionnaire wearing lip gloss. Bryn excused herself to use the restroom, left her phone face up on the table. I didn't touch it, but when it buzzed, the screen lit up. Text preview. Did he admit he's not okay? Ask about the house. That's when I knew. She wasn't winging it. She was collecting evidence. A couple weeks later, after things exploded, Bryn would tell Harlan the full list. Quentin had coached her. Marla told her which words to use. Paranoid, erratic, worried. She was told to stay calm no matter what, because that made her more credible. But that day, all I had was instinct and a lit-up phone screen. I got home and started a new log. Time, location, what was said, what she asked, and the exact text preview that popped up. I didn't delete the message thread. I forwarded it to myself and stored a screenshot in the folder labeled Sister Contact. While I was documenting, Tamsin called. She'd gotten metadata back from 2 lenders I'd filed disputes with. Both sent logs from their internal systems, timestamps, IP addresses, device fingerprints. Same device signature showed up across 3 applications, she said, and the IP data's clustered around Quentin's office neighborhood. I didn't say anything. Tamsin added, they didn't even use a VPN. It's either arrogance or stupidity. Harlan didn't want to confront them yet, not while we were still gathering. If we struck too soon, they'd clean their trail. He wanted them to think they were ahead. Comfort makes people careless, he told me. Let them think they're still steering. That same week, my job started getting weird. An email hit our general compliance inbox. Anonymous sender. Claimed I was mentally unstable and had access to sensitive systems at the bank. Nobody showed it to me, but the shift in tone from HR was instant. I was suddenly on everyone's radar. Meetings felt shorter. Wade watched me more closely. I didn't break routine. Instead, I wrote everything down. Names, times, how people acted. I started keeping summaries of every client interaction, every system I accessed. I logged what I did each day like I was already on trial, because I understood something now. This wasn't just about my credit or my house. Marla and Quentin wanted to poison every piece of my life, including my paycheck. The more proof we gathered behind the scenes, the louder Marla got in public. She didn't just aim at the judge. She aimed at my life like it was a stage set she could decorate with her version of me. She posted old photos on her Facebook. Me in a Halloween costume when I was maybe 6. A school picture Dory must have mailed her before cutting off contact. The captions were syrupy. Hoping my son accepts help during this hard time. And of course, he's not himself since losing his grandma. I just want him to get back on his feet. The comment section filled with strangers calling her brave. Some said things like, "Don't give up on him." One woman posted a long quote about second chances. I wasn't tagged, but the message was clear. She wanted an audience, not a conversation. Then my cousin Marlene Quill decided to stir the pot. She kicked off a group thread on Messenger titled, "Check on Bram." She didn't reach out to me privately. She reached for a spotlight. The message said, "Y'all, Bram's going through something serious. He needs support right now." Like I was a cautionary tale in a community newsletter. It wasn't about concern. It was branding. That's when the pressure started leaking into places it didn't belong. Reed Kessler, my landlord, called me one night after dinner. He sounded polite but tight. "Hey Bram, just checking in. Everything okay on your end?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "Well, a woman came by last week, said she was your mother. She asked if you'd been paying rent on time. She said you might be going through something." I clenched the phone tighter. "I've never missed a payment," I said flat. "No, you haven't." "I told her that," Reed replied, "but I figured I should let you know." She seemed determined. Reed didn't want to be in the middle, but now he was. At a community gathering the following Sunday, 2 older women I didn't know well, Deborah and Eloise, pulled me aside in the vestibule. Eloise touched my arm like we were close. "We've just been thinking about you, honey," she said, voice soft like a lullaby. "We heard you're under a lot of stress." I nodded once and excused myself. They didn't mean harm, but they'd heard a story, and they believed it. Back at work, Wade called me into his office again. He folded his hands and looked at me like I was a problem he hoped would fix itself. "Bram, I think it might be wise to take a short leave. Clear your head, just until things stabilize." I didn't argue. I could see he wasn't coming from malice. He was just easy to sway, and Marla knew how to sway people. Harlan warned me to stay quiet. Anything you post can be twisted into evidence of instability. You're a man in a suit. They'll paint you as aggressive faster than they'd ever do to someone like her. He was right. I said nothing. Tamsin kept digging. One night she called with a tone that told me she'd hit something. "She's been making regular payments for years," she said. "But there's a pattern. Big cash advances show up right after big events. One hit right after Dory's funeral. Another landed the same week she called you for the first time. So it wasn't just old fraud, it was still active. Then something came in sideways. Kendra called me one evening, voice sharp. One of Dory's old co-workers reached out, said someone tried to pull deed records last month, asked about a transfer form, quit claim or something like that." My chest tightened. "Who?" She said the caller used the name Marla Marsh. Sounded polite, but pushy. I called Harlan. He had contacts at the county office. Within days, he pulled the formal log. It showed the request, timestamp, and name. They weren't just after the credit. They were circling the house. That week, I changed the locks. I installed 2 cameras, one front, one back. I moved the originals and anything with my social security number out of Dory's filing cabinet and into a bolted fireproof safe I kept inside the condo. Not because I was scared, because I was finished being soft access. I didn't make noise. I didn't post a thing. I watched them push harder, watched people in my life shift under the weight of rumors. That silence cost me. People looked at me different, but it bought time. Time to stack proof. And when the time came to speak, I'd have more than words. The deeper they reached, the steadier I got. Every fake smile, every stage sympathy post, every lie whispered into someone else's ear, it all became fuel. 4 weeks before the hearing, Harlan laid it out in plain terms. "We don't interrupt them," he said. "Let Marla go first. Let Quentin lean on his script. Then we flip the whole thing from guardianship to fraud." Simple words, heavy strategy. He had me meet with a real psychiatrist, Dr. Anika Rutledge, board certified. Zero connection to anyone in the case. We sat for over an hour in a quiet room where nothing felt rehearsed. She asked sharp questions, but never once made me feel trapped. 2 days later, her written report landed in Harlan's inbox. No signs of impairment. Competent, emotionally sound, capable of managing personal and financial matters. Meanwhile, Harlan went after the ghost in their case, Dr. Lowell Price. He pulled every scrap on him he could find. Price's license wasn't just expired, it had been revoked. Past cases, multiple complaints, especially around court filings that looked suspiciously identical. He'd been used in civil disputes before, mostly to rubber stamp claims for people who didn't want the truth, just results. And buried in one of those past filings, Quentin Marsh used Price as an expert witness 7 years ago in a land access case. That wasn't coincidence. That was a pipeline. Tamsin tightened her timeline. 12 fraudulent accounts in total, 9 credit cards, 1 retail line, 2 personal loans. The billing addresses tied to Marla's old rentals, scattered across 2 states, plus 1 that linked back to Quentin's firm. She even found a pattern in how the debt was managed. All accounts received minimum payments. None were charged off. They were being kept alive like a long con, enough to use, not enough to flag. Harlan subpoenaed their financials. We didn't expect cooperation, but the court order forced disclosure. Inside one account's history, we saw a payment made directly from an account tied to Quentin's law office operating fund. That wasn't sloppy, that was arrogant. While Tamsin was building evidence, I went back to Dory's desk looking for a birth certificate copy I thought I'd missed. Instead, I found something else. Behind her ledger book was a small key and a folded sheet of paper. Typed, sharp tone, pure Dory. It listed a bank name and a safe deposit box number. At the bottom, one line in all caps. "If Marla ever returns asking about Bram's finances, contact Harlan Bell immediately and freeze all credit access. Under that were 3 dated entries. Times Marla had contacted her in the past asking for money. $7,800 once, $5,000 another time, and one request just listed as blank check. I didn't cry. I stood there with the note in one hand and the key in the other and felt my entire spine go stiff. Dory saw this coming. Maybe not the exact scheme, but the shape of it. She knew who Marla was. She just didn't know when she'd show up again. Inside the deposit box was the original notarized letter. Same content. Same warning. Signed and dated 7 years earlier. That same week, Bryn reached out. Not to me, to Harlan. She said she was done being used as a mouthpiece, and that what they were asking her to do didn't feel like family. It felt like a setup. She didn't want another coffee meeting. She wanted a way out. She sent him a voice file her phone had recorded by accident. She'd left it running in her bag. The clip caught Marla and Quentin rehearsing with her, feeding her lines, reminding her what words to emphasize. Harlan called me and played part of it over the phone. Quentin's voice was low but clear. If you say paranoid twice, the judge will remember it. Steady voice, worried eyes. That's the tone. Bryn signed an affidavit confirming it was her phone, her file, and that it hadn't been edited. 3 days before the hearing, I got a credit alert at 2 a.m. New card, high limit, same-day cash advance for nearly $5,000. That wasn't a mistake. That was a final grab. The credit bureau report showed the mailing address matched one of Quentin's business listings. We already had that address on file. The application metadata came in later through subpoena. Same device fingerprint Tamsin had flagged weeks ago. When I told Harlan, he actually smiled. Good, he said. Let them keep digging. Every shovel of dirt they move becomes part of the record. The Saturday before court, I drove out to Dory's place just after sunrise. Harlan needed a set of old tax records to back our claim that everything in my name had been clean, stable, and predictable before Marla re-entered the picture. The kind of data a judge can't argue with. Boring on purpose. When I turned onto the gravel driveway, my stomach locked. Marla's SUV was there, Quentin's car behind it, parked straight, calm, like this was some scheduled meeting, and not what it actually was, trespassing. I cut the engine and sat there for a second, staring at the front door. It was cracked open. I hadn't left it like that. The deadbolt I'd installed was still intact. No splintered frame, no pry marks. If they got in, they did it the way Quentin did everything. Clean, quiet, and deniable. I stepped inside and saw Marla standing by the fireplace, fingers on the mantel like she was deciding whether to keep it or replace it. Her eyes didn't flinch when she saw me. Quentin was near the hallway, holding a single sheet of paper, like it was some polite offer. "You're early," he said, like I was the one interrupting something. He extended the paper. "This is a voluntary conservatorship agreement. If you sign now, we can avoid the courtroom and manage things quietly. It's the smart way, Bram." Marla stepped toward me, voice shaky on command. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," she said. "I'm protecting you from yourself. You've been under too much stress. You're not thinking clearly. The judge won't like seeing a young man pushing away family trying to help." She blinked twice. No tears. Then her mouth tightened. "You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of the court. This is your chance to do it with dignity." I didn't move. I didn't touch the paper. I pulled out my phone. "You've got 10 seconds to leave," I said. "Or I call the sheriff and press charges for unlawful entry and attempted coercion." Quentin's smile stayed frozen in place, but his jaw flexed, controlled, but tight. They left without another word, but just as Quentin stepped out the door, he paused. "You'll regret making this public," he said. Voice calm, like it was already decided, as if this circus hadn't been made public by them the second they filed a petition full of lies and dropped it in front of a judge. After they were gone, I didn't breathe relief. I went straight to the filing cabinet. 2 items were missing: a photocopy of my birth certificate and a folder with a few old insurance forms I'd left behind for reference. Nothing dramatic, but they included identifiers, policy numbers, old account links, enough to keep the fraud machine humming. My front door camera caught everything: plates, timestamp, their exact exit. No raised voices, no conflict, just presence, proof, That night I wrote a formal summary for Harlan. Name, time, location, what they brought, what they took. No emotion, no speculation. Just facts. Because facts hold up in court. Feelings don't. Monday morning, it got worse. I walked into the office and got called upstairs before I could even sit down. Wade looked like he hadn't slept. He closed the door and folded his hands on the desk like he was trying to hold a position he didn't believe in. HR's putting you on administrative leave, he said. Pending review. Someone raised a concern about your fitness to work in a sensitive role. I stared at him, then asked, "Was it anonymous?" He nodded once, quickly. I didn't see the original email, but it referenced the same court filing. I didn't argue. I walked out with my head high, past 3 coworkers who avoided my eyes, and got in my truck without saying a word. Marla wasn't just trying to take the money. She was trying to close the air around me, 1 inch at a time. The courtroom was bare. No wood paneling, no drama, just fluorescent lights, hard benches, and one judge who looked like she'd rather be dealing with tax cases than family messes. Judge Celeste Rowe, mid-60s, short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, no visible tolerance for nonsense. Marla sat at the petitioner's table in a black dress like she was attending a funeral. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her mouth pressed tight in a way that said she'd practiced restraint in a mirror. Quentin sat beside her, posture straight, suit perfect, confident in that quiet way some men carry when they think the rules are on their side. Bryn was there too, hands clasped, shoulders squared. She looked rehearsed, like a girl who knew her lines but wasn't sure she wanted to say them out loud. The hearing started with Quentin. He stood smoothly, greeted the judge like an old friend, and walked her through their claim. I was grieving, unstable, prone to anger, and displaying behavior consistent with disassociation and paranoia. He used terms like financial instability, executive dysfunction, and escalating resistance to family outreach. He leaned into the gender card without saying it directly. A man in distress, a man who wouldn't listen, a man making dangerous decisions. Then Bryn was called. She sat with perfect posture and answered each question slowly, like she was reaching for the right words from memory. She said I acted suspicious, that I seemed like I was always being watched, that I told her I didn't trust anyone, not even banks. The air in the room shifted. Her voice wasn't shaky, but it wasn't firm either. What she said didn't sound explosive. It sounded foggy, and that was the point, to cloud things. Harlan didn't move right away. When he stood, he didn't rush. He opened a binder and started setting documents on the table one by one, like he was laying bricks. First came the real psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Anika Rutledge. Competent, stable, no impairment, dated, signed, board certified. Then my employment records, clean, no incidents, still technically active despite the temporary leave. Next was my full payment history. Every utility bill, tax form, insurance premium, predictable, consistent. Then came Dr. Lowell Price. Harlan read the revocation notice out loud. Complaints of falsified reports, multiple investigations, professional misconduct. Then he handed over the records showing Quentin had used Price before, in a property dispute from 7 years back. Judge Rowe's pen stopped moving the moment she heard that name. Tamsin's timeline came next. 12 fraudulent accounts totaling nearly $95,000. Billing addresses tied to Marla's old rentals and one commercial address belonging to Quentin. Harlan laid the newest card on the table. Opened 3 days ago, cash advance within hours. Same device fingerprint as our previous applications, tied to Quentin's office. Judge Rowe turned to Marla. "Can you explain this?" Marla's voice cracked the second she tried. She blamed someone else, claimed someone must have used our address. But the way her voice dipped in and out of character, it didn't hold. Harlan didn't stop. He introduced a handwriting comparison between one of the loan forms and an old letter Marla had written to Dory. Then came the hammer. He played the audio Bryn had provided, Quentin's voice first. Coaching tone, use paranoid. Say you're worried. Keep your voice steady. Marla chimed in next. Say he made you uncomfortable. Say he doesn't sleep. Then Bryn's voice. Should I say he raised his voice? Bryn, sitting in that same courtroom, went pale as her own voice echoed back to her. Then she stood up without being asked. She looked right at the judge. "I was coached," she said, quiet but clear. They told me what to say. I didn't know about the credit stuff. I didn't want to lie. Not like this. Marla spun on her like a match catching fire. "You little—" The bailiff stepped between them fast. Judge Rowe lifted her hand and brought it down like a gavel even before she touched the real one. Conservatorship denied. She didn't stop there. A restraining order was issued on the spot. She referred the fraud evidence to the district attorney's office for formal investigation. And she flagged Quentin Marsh for bar review. Right there, on record, with his name spelled out in full. Quentin didn't smile again. 2 weeks after the hearing, the prosecutor's office sent a letter confirming what we already knew. An investigation was officially open. I wasn't there for the interviews, but Harlan copied me on every update. I read them all, no emotion, just confirmation. Charges came next: identity theft, fraudulent credit activity, and 2 counts linked directly to the last-minute cash advances. Marla's whole act of concern finally had a name that fit. Her story didn't just collapse, it burned. Quentin's fall came cleaner. First, a suspension notice from the bar, then public filings triggered more complaints. Turns out my case wasn't special. He'd pulled stunts with forged records and backdated forms before. People just hadn't been watching yet. My job situation healed slower. Wade called me into his office and didn't try to spin it. He looked me in the eye and said, "I'm sorry. I believed what was easiest." HR reinstated me 2 days later, after Harlan confirmed the complaint was part of an active harassment attempt. Tamsin and I spent weekends fixing what was left: disputes, letters, confirmation emails, a thick binder full of form numbers and fraud reversals. My credit didn't bounce back fast, but it started to recover. One lie erased at a time. Reed, my landlord, called again. Said Marla had reached out twice, once to warn him, once to ask if I'd left town. He gave Harlan a statement, signed and simple. Not because he wanted to pick sides, but because he didn't want to be part of a lie. Marlene and a few other relatives circled back with their versions of apology, soft inspirational quotes, hints that maybe she meant well. I didn't yell, I didn't debate, I just stopped replying. Silence was easier, it was clean. Bryn didn't try to contact me directly. She sent a short apology through Harlan. I read it once. She said she didn't know how deep it ran, that she thought she was helping. I believe she was used. I also believe she agreed to be used, right up until it cracked her. I didn't need loud revenge. I went for structural. I moved into Dory's house full time, replaced the locks, added real cameras top and bottom. I digitized everything and froze my credit like a steel gate. Nobody could so much as check my name without it hitting my phone. I found Dory's old note again, the one from the deposit box. I had it framed in the hallway, just past the coat rack. It didn't make me cry. It made me feel exact. The last thing I did was send Judge Rowe's ruling and the prosecutor's referral to every credit bureau and every lender tied to the case. That record followed Marla and Quentin the same way their fraud tried to follow me. What I kept wasn't just the house. I kept control. And they learned on paper that when the facts are stacked right, the system they tried to twist can snap back and crush you flat. Quick question before you bounce. If you've got the hype button, tap it to push this video out to more people who need it. Then hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if a parent who abandoned you came back and tried to legally take control of your life the moment money was involved?